back and spinning her around with its impact, sending her tumbling to the ground. I ran up to her and firmly dragged her to her feet, seeing that the object had struck her pack was actually some kind of dart, a large dart carved from stone and wood, nearly a foot long, which had nearly gone all the way through the pack. Now we'd gone completely off the trail and straight into the deep underbrush among the dense stands of trees. We just kept sprinting in the direction we thought our trail led, hoping that we would eventually stumble upon our destination. The shuffling of the man chasing us had changed into a long, loping sprint, as if he were jumping through the brush and between the trees rather than simply running. Whoever he was, he must have known of plenty of hidden trails and paths leading through the forest, having no trouble at all keeping up with us. Despite the adrenaline, I could feel my energy starting to wane, and I was struggling quite a bit to keep up my speed running over such rough ground. I was now convinced that I was just about to die, caught by this man and subjected to God knows what at his hands. Presumably like all the others who had disappeared in this dark place. I pulled out my knife, hoping that maybe I could mount some kind of final stand if I was caught, and I was shouting to Clarissa to keep going when that horrible odor descended upon me. I felt an enormous weight plow right into the small of my back. The fierce, searing sensation of a harsh scrape suddenly covered my neck and the back of my head as I collapsed forward into the ground, the weight now pinning me firmly down, and in that moment my mind went utterly blank as I waited for what I thought would be death. Clarissa had frozen in place in complete horror as the man stood over me once again. I could barely manage to roll over and regard him before the end. He crouched low over me, grunting loudly, blowing hot, foul-smelling breath into my face. He quickly snapped his attention over to Clarissa as she screamed in terror, and with a sudden start, he leaped astonishingly high in the air, landing neatly on his feet and sprinting off towards Clarissa. She sprinted off into the forest, no longer caring to follow the trail. I struggled to my feet and called Clarissa's name plaintively, although now she and the man had disappeared from my sight. I wanted to run after them, hoping that I could somehow save her from all this, but I hesitated for a few seconds. To this day, I lament the cowardice I showed in those few critical seconds, where I seriously contemplated taking advantage of this distraction to make my own escape instead. I stayed put for a few seconds, calling her name helplessly. I then got to my feet and started walking in the direction they'd gone, though at a much slower pace than I would have needed to catch them up. For several minutes I stumbled through the woods in the direction I thought they'd gone, now racked with guilt over having brought my friend out to this place to die like this. Painful as this guilt was, it did spur my last reserves of energy and increase my pace. I could no longer hear Clarissa's screams, a fact that made my heart sink precipitously. I came over the crest of a short hill and saw that I was overlooking a broad, flat gully with steep sides and thick brush along the entire slope. Wondering what I should do now, I followed the top edge of the gully down a short ways, hoping for any sign of where the two had ended up. I finally sank to my knees, and for a few despondent minutes, I lost my courage and resolve completely. All of this was my fault. Clarissa had insisted that she come to this place, but I hadn't done nearly enough to discourage her from coming here, especially after yesterday, when I knew for a fact that something dangerous was probably lurking out here. I buried my face in my hands and broke down in tears. For several minutes I stayed in this state, convinced that Clarissa was probably dead and that I myself was going to die, and that I probably deserved it for bringing us out to this horrible place. I was startled to suddenly detect a familiar scream, Clarissa's scream, coming from the woods on the other side of the gully. Hearing this restored my spirits tremendously. Even given our still terrible circumstances, and I started calling out her name again. Her screams came closer and closer, until I finally saw her emerge from the forest on the other side. I shouted her name at the top of my lungs, and for a moment she turned her attention and caught sight of me, visibly relieved. Clarissa's relieved expression suddenly became blank, and she pitched forward violently, completely limp, and tumbled face down over the edge of the gully and all the way down into the brush below. I was shocked and utterly petrified by this. I gazed stupidly at where she landed in the brush and disappeared from sight. Barely comprehending what had just happened, I screamed her name in horror, clinging to some vague hope that she was still okay. I was about to jump over the edge of the gully and go down to her when I saw, standing in the forest just beyond the opposite side, the tall man. He just glared at me without moving, his hateful gaze pinning me in place for several seconds. I slowly backpedaled away from the gully, never avoiding his gaze, and I just sprinted in the opposite direction, leaving my faithful friend and companion to whatever fate this hunter had in mind. I'm ashamed now of what I did, leaving Clarissa to this man's mercy like that. But I've never claimed to be a particularly strong or brave man, and I was filled with such terror that I could only think of getting out of this place. With newfound energy, I tore through the forest in the general direction of the main trail, never taking my eyes off the area behind me for more than a few seconds. Before too long, however, I heard that same shuffling cadence behind me, knowing that the hunter was clearly intending to catch up to me as well. But now I was resigned to death. As I ran, I suddenly tripped over a small rise that, to my surprise and brief joy, was the edge of the main trail. We had strayed some ways off the trail, but not as far as I'd feared. I paused for a second, hands on my knees, exalting this favorable sign, hardly paying attention to the footsteps in the forest rapidly closing in on me. I turned in that direction, standing in place with complete resignation, no longer caring to run anymore. I saw the hunter slinking and leaping through the brush many yards distant, quickly closing the distance, when he paused in what seemed like confusion. I think perhaps he hadn't expected me to give up like this, or that the fact I wasn't running anymore didn't trigger his instinct to chase. Instead, I shouted in his direction, bellowing profanities and saying that I didn't care if I lived or died, and challenging him to take up the pursuit again. I gripped my knife tightly, fully intending to put up a fight this time, while the hunter just slowly approached me, his eyes fixed on mine. I don't know if he even understood a word of what I yelled at him, but I just kept yelling and carrying on, hoping that his confusion might give me an opening. When he was about 5 yards from me, the hunter slunk into a slow stance, like a wild animal preparing to pounce. For a few seconds, we glared at one another, clearly not sure who would make the first move. Then, with another rasping grunt, he sprung up and charged at me with all his might. That moment, time seemed to slow down to a crawl, but even with this illusion, he appeared to cross the distance with remarkable speed. My inhibitions now gone, I did the first thing I could think of and raised the knife over my shoulder and pitched it like Rambo. The knife streaked through the air and caught him across his stomach. He gave a powerful yelp that startled me out of my petrified state and clasped at his stomach, glaring at me more hatefully than ever. For a few seconds, I thought my idiotic gambit had failed, that I'd only angered him and left myself without the knife in the process. He seethed and spat between his crooked, rotten teeth, that awful stench seeming to get even worse than it had before. With a furious wail, he suddenly turned around and loped back in the direction from which he'd come, giving off those animalistic grunts as he went. I was stupefied by this for several seconds, hardly believing that this had worked after all. I inched forward to where my knife had landed after skidding across his stomach, and I saw that I had indeed drawn blood with my well-aimed throw. I snatched it up off the ground and backed up towards the trail. After his sudden retreat, I considered if perhaps I should go back to the gully where Clarissa had fallen, hoping that maybe I could find her and be sure of her fate. I couldn't. I've been lucky 3 times now, narrowly escaping death by mere inches. Now that I'd more or less returned to my senses, I was sensibly afraid again of trying my luck for a 4th time. Instead, I decided that I would leave the forest, return to town, get help, and hopefully come back with a small army at my back. After all, I had been attacked in the woods, and my friend was probably badly hurt and in serious danger. With this rationale, I ran down the trail to where I'd parked my car and returned to Renovo as fast as I could. I pulled into the nearest sheriff's station in town and went in, startling everyone inside with my ragged state and frantic demeanor. Fortunately, my local reputation had preceded me, and the deputies at the station were quite attentive to my report, however frantic and disorganized it was. They advised me to stay put while they put together a search party and investigated the forest, but I was adamant that I accompany them. This they denied, saying that I should instead try to get the scratches on my head and neck looked at by a doctor. The scratches had been deeper than I'd realized, with some amount of blood having trickled down and around my neck. I don't know exactly what made those scratches, if it was some kind of weapon the man carried, or if he had possibly done it with one of his long fingernails. I begrudgingly did as I asked, went by the local clinic. In addition to these scratches, I had a lightly sprained ankle and numerous other cuts and bruises, as well as a sore back from where I'd been tackled twice. The scratches on my head had become quite tender and painful, and according to the doctor, the wounds were absolutely filthy, lodged with dirt and grime, and he was curious as to just how I'd gotten them. All I could say was I'd been attacked out in the forest, but I didn't say by what. This seemed to satisfy his curiosity for a time. The doctor then cleaned the wounds as best he could, and even had to put in some stitches on one of them. I got a prescription for some antibiotics in case the infection developed, and the idea of contracting any infection from that man's filthy fingernails made my skin crawl. After this, I returned to the station to await further news about what had been found in the forest. I would wait there for several hours, anxious and despairing over what had happened to Clarissa, and hoping beyond all reason that she was okay, despite what I had seen. At around 7 o'clock in the evening, the deputies returned to discuss what they'd found. To my confusion and disappointment, they had uncovered nothing. They knew that the 2 of us had indeed gone up there, but they'd found no trace of Clarissa or the man who'd chased us anywhere. The rest was a blur to me. I was despondent over the deputies' lack of success, and furious that they didn't seem to really want to search those woods, as if they too had heeded the local rumors about what had happened in the forest. Even though a group their size should have been relatively safe, the legend surrounding Dutchman's Hollow had such a grip on the locals that even a large search party didn't bolster their confidence. With nothing substantive found to support my story, I was shocked to find that suspicion now fell on me. After all, a young woman was missing, and I'd been the last person to see her alive. According to them, the numerous wounds on my body could have been the result of a struggle between the 2 of us, not necessarily from a third suspect, although nobody could say for certain just what had happened to her. I stayed in town for another few days, while they wasted their time accusing me of having something to do with her disappearance, a deeply distressing experience that nearly ruined my interest in being a true crime investigator. After 4 days spent on searches, they finally found out exactly what had happened to Clarissa all those days ago. She was dead. I don't know how I could have expected anything else, but she was definitely dead. According to them, she was found at the base of a steep slope in the forest, her body in such a poor shape that it took some time to identify it as hers. The body was missing substantial portions of flesh on the legs and back. a fact that was attributed to predation by scavenger animals. The cause of death was determined to be a severe head wound on the back of her skull, presumably the result of stumbling down the hill and hitting her head on a rock or log, inflicting a fatal injury. And that was it, apparently. Despite my story, the official cause of death was death by misadventure, and the file was abruptly closed on the whole thing. Her remains were recovered and delivered to the care of her family, who, as I expected, blamed me for what had happened to her, even if they didn't accuse me of foul play. I can't say that I blame them. I wasn't even invited to attend the funeral. I don't think I could have, anyway. Thinking of my close friend being in that state, ripped apart by scavenging animals, was just too much for me to bear. As for me, I was exonerated by this hasty and abrupt conclusion to how she officially died. After all these years, I still don't fully understand why my story was ignored by the authorities, why they just brushed me off after she was found and examined, even when they seemed to believe me wholeheartedly in those first few hours. For years, I nursed thoughts of a grand conspiracy to suppress any stories about what happens in those woods. A conspiracy that had encompassed generations of locals and the authorities. But after some time, I abandoned this thinking. Now I think they just assumed we were stupid kids who got lost in the woods and one of us got themselves killed by accident. Or that it was just a wild animal attack. Nothing nefarious whatsoever. I don't deny that we were just dumb kids, way in over our heads. But I know just what we found in those woods. Whatever they say, I know that it wasn't just an animal attack, a nightmare or a wild fantasy. 30 years later, I like to think that this experience, horrifying and soul-crushing though it was, helped me mature both as a person and as a writer of true crime. I'm no longer the silly kid who pursued it as a morbid hobby, crusading across the country in search of cheap thrills at the expense of real human tragedies. I learned the respect that the subject demands, and I know what it truly means to serve the public interest, profit or not. And in between my researches for new cases and book material, I still periodically renew my investigation into the mystery surrounding Dutchman's Hollow. By now I must have a file 4 inches thick about it. To this day, people still do disappear in abnormal numbers in the region. Travelers, hitchhikers, loggers, campers, all types that pass through. In all that time, nobody else has ever shown interest in investigating it besides me. Few people ever reference the history of it. I still think about what happened in the forest in those grim days of 1989. I wonder how it all connects to the history of the region. I think about the original settler families, the Macduffs and the Van der Heiders, and just what could have happened to them all those years ago. Did they really die out in the winter of 1806? Had anybody even bothered to look for them in the time since? Who was the last living descendant of those two families? Were any of the grisly and salacious rumors about them true? Could one of their descendants survive to this day? I remember that passing joke about cannibalism that Clarissa made that day in the library, and I remember how they attributed her ravished remains to being eaten by scavengers. I still think about those things, and I can't help but think that a descendant of the original settlers still lives, that maybe they had to resort to drastic measures to stay alive in all those harsh winters. Maybe they developed a taste for it, and so did their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren on down. I think about these things, and I remember the tall man with pale blonde hair and the scraggly blonde beard, and my stomach turns when I consider what he planned to do when he caught us. But I have other reasons for writing this down now. For 30 years I've uncovered precious little new evidence surrounding what happens in Dutchman's Hollow, but all of that has changed in the last few days. I've already told the story of Raymond Hess, the only known survivor of all the people who have ever disappeared in the region, about how his later years were marred by accusations of involvement in several murders, accusations never proven. For years I knew nothing about what happened to him or where he went when he left the United States in 1980. Recently, I came into possession of information revealing this exactly. He floated around different countries in Central America, first in Mexico and then Belize, before eventually turning up in Chile several years later. In 1987, he was arrested, charged and convicted of a string of 12 murders in central Chile, a region he terrorized for years as a widely feared serial killer known as the Vampire of Valparaiso. In 1988, while serving a life sentence, he granted an interview to a Colombian psychiatrist named Heriberto Zayas, an interview that was videotaped but kept confidential for several decades. I've seen this video. I can't tell you how I managed to get a hold of it, but be rest assured that I did, and it cost me dearly. What follows next is a transcript of the interview, which Hess gave in English, and he describes what exactly happened to him those 2 weeks he was missing in Dutchman's Hollow. The tape was rather poor in quality even for that time, but after several viewings, I'm confident that I have transcribed it in its entirety. I can't tell you what you should make of what you read. You'll just have to form your own conclusions. Interview start. This is Dr. Heriberto Zayas. Interview with prisoner designated CF 1855334. Name Raymond Hess. From United States. Convicted 1911-87 for murder. Sentenced to life term. Can you speak into the microphone, please, Mr. Hess? Yeah. Hello. Good. So, Mr. Hess, I have some questions for you here, but I may ask some others as we go along. Is that all right? Sure. Excellent. So, Mr. Hess, you are from the United States. Verda, correct? Yes, that's correct. Where in the United States? I mean, where did you live? I'm originally from Pennsylvania. Altoona, actually. I see. Is it a nice place? Yeah, good place. I kind of miss it. I'm sure you do. You grew up there? Yep. Do you wish you could go back? Yeah, all the time. I can't, though. Why not? You have family there, right? I just can't. Can't go back to America at all. Some shit happened back there. I just can't go back. What happened? Could your family help you? They can't help me. I just can't go back. Not to them, not to anybody. But why not? Mr. Hess? I can't go back because the same reason I'm in jail right now in this country. You have a criminal record in America. Yeah, I've been accused of stuff, but I never got put in jail for anything. What were you accused of? Same stuff I'm in jail for right now. You were accused of murder, of cannibalism. Something like that, yeah. I see. Well, I have some other questions as well, about you personally. Is that okay? Yeah, sure. Doesn't matter. Okay, well, can you tell me about your childhood, your parents? What about them? They're okay. So they were good to you? Caring? Loving? Yeah, they were fine. Never hit me or anything. Except when I had it coming. And the rest of your family, how were they? Good, I guess. I have an older brother. Were you close to him? Yeah, sure. Usual brother stuff. What sort of brother stuff? Usual stuff. Walk me to school, help me with bullies, playing catch, yeah, that kind of stuff. Wasn't anything fucked up, if that's what you're getting at. No, it's fine. I see what you mean. Sure you do. Well then, let's talk about your school. How was school? Okay, pretty much. I wasn't that good at it.
You had difficulty in your classes?
Sometimes, sure.
Were you ever mocked, made fun of for not doing well?
No, I don't think so.
You mentioned bullies earlier.
Sometimes, nothing too bad.
I see, well...
It was all pretty normal.
Come again, Mr. Hess.
I said, it was normal. My childhood, I mean. I didn't have a fucked up childhood or anything. It was normal. Above board, nothing weird or sinister or anything like that.
I see, so,
Look, man, I know you're trying to get into my childhood and all that, but there's nothing there. I know I'm in jail for some bad stuff, but I'm not Ted Bundy or the fucking Zodiac or something. I'm a normal guy. Well, I used to be pretty normal.
I see. You said you used to be normal.
Yeah, guess I did.
What do you mean by this? Mr. Hess, should we continue or...
Yeah, I could tell you about it, maybe. Can't say you're gonna believe it, but I'll tell you. Don't you go telling anybody else about it, huh? They'll just think you're nuts or something.
Okay, Mr. Hess.
I'm serious, man. If you're just gonna write me off as a nut job, then, well, I'm done here.
No, that's not what I'm suggesting, Mr. Hess.
I'm not a real bad guy, okay? I'm not a psycho or anything. Yeah, I've done some nasty shit, but none of it's really about me.
I understand how you feel, Mr. Hess. But you say these things. Your crimes, they speak for themselves, no?
What did I just say? I ain't fucking lunatic. I said none of that stuff is really about me.
Please, calm down. You say it's not about you. What do you mean by this?
Look, I'll explain it, but you gotta listen real close, you know. I mean, look, imagine like a coyote or something. You got coyotes here, right?
Yes, we do.
Right. Well, imagine a coyote. He's real hungry. So he goes out, catches and kills a little baby bunny. Sounds bad, right? At face value, I mean. Kills a little bunny, eats it. But we don't all get pissed off about a coyote eating a little bunny, do we? He's gotta eat too. Everybody's gotta eat. I gotta eat. It's life. You just take what comes to you, what you catch, and you end up living another day. Because the alternative to living is even worse.
I understand your meaning, Mr. Hess, but...
But what? You don't sound like you get it.
I understand, but you say that you must do these things because you must eat?
Yeah. That's not so fucking hard, is it?
Mr. Hess, you are in prison because you killed and ate many people. You say you must eat, but why like this?
There is other food, is there not?
These people, they have lost family. You cannot understand why you are here?
You think I don't know there's other food out there? You think I don't at least try eating it? Because I do. Well, it ain't the same. It just ain't. I couldn't live only on ribeye steaks any more than I could live on eating only dog turds. And I fucking try. Back home, I tried with pork chops. I heard that's almost like eating people, you know. I'd take these pork chops and just wail on them with a meat tenderizer, trying to get them real soft, you know. I thought I was getting real close too, but it just didn't work.
But why? Why do you have to eat only human flesh? You can't live your whole life this way. You'd have to kill a man every day to live only on that.
I try to get by on what I can.
Don't think I don't try.
I tried the pork chops. I tried steak and chicken and duck. I found a guy in Valparaiso who can get all kinds of meat, even that African bush meat, like monkeys and that kind of shit, illegal stuff. And it was close, man. But there ain't nothing close enough to live on forever.
That stuff could get me by for weeks, maybe a few months, and when I couldn't stand it no more, I just had to have the real deal. You don't get it, man. I feel like if I don't have that stuff, I'll just die. You mean to say you're addicted to eating it? It ain't quite like that, man. It ain't like drugs. Junkies can just quit that stuff for long enough that they get over it. I tried, and I couldn't. Not even after 6 months. It's not an addiction. It's the hunger. The hunger? What is that? What it sounds like, man. It's the hunger. You can't fight it forever. Once you get it, it doesn't go away. You always get hungry for that one thing. Nothing else fills the hole. If you can't have it, you starve. Well, you feel like you're starving, but only worse. You feel like you'll just turn inside out if you can't get it. Like the whole goddamn universe will cave in on you if you don't feed it. You think this is why you must eat human meat? I don't think I have it. I have it. I got it years ago. Nothing makes it go away. You feed it for a time, and it goes down inside you for a while. But you always know it'll be back. What caused you to get this hunger? Shit. I know. I think I know. What was it? It wasn't always like this, man. I was normal. I was a good person. Shit like this shouldn't have happened to me. It happened back in America. 11 years ago. Almost a third of my whole life. Go on. You know, not a lot of people can say there's one moment, one exact moment where absolutely everything in your whole life changes. I was just driving down the road late one night. Normal thing. Something I've done 1,000 times or more. Just driving through one of the state forests in Pennsylvania on my way to my next job. And I was happy, you know. I didn't give a damn about anything. A job here, a job there. Spent some dough in the local bar. That was my life. Now I can't remember what it felt like. I was driving along the road and I saw this guy just lying there on the side of the road. Looked like he was dead or something. Kind of dirty guy. Long hair, scruffy beard. So I thought he was just a bum or something. So I figured, hey, I'll be a good guy today. I'll stop and see if this guy's hurt or something. If I was down on my luck like this guy, I'd want someone to help me out. Pulled off the road to go check on him, and I'm leaning over him and pow! Something just knocks my lights out. I didn't see what. I come to maybe a minute later, and no shit, I'm hogtied. Being dragged by my feet through the woods, facing the dirt. I had no idea just what the hell I'd walked into. So I start yelling and carrying on, trying to get a good look at who's doing this. But it's dark, and I can't lean up to get a good look. Then I start thinking about what's going on. I mean, I got ambushed. I'm getting dragged through the woods all tied up. I don't know where I'm going. So I'm thinking I'm about to get roped into some kind of shit from Deliverance or something. Like I'm gonna get raped or tortured by some fucking hell people. You were kidnapped? Well, yeah, I didn't volunteer to go with this guy. And this guy was walking real fast, too. And I feel like my face is gonna look like an old tire by the time we get there. Eventually, we do. I get chucked into this cave or dugout or something. And I'm just left there, still tied up. I'm like this for days. For days just pissing and shitting in my own pants. Not that I had much to piss or shit, because I wasn't getting any food or water. Every couple of hours, this guy, that same bum I found on the side of the road, just comes in and kicks the shit out of me. Doesn't say a word either. He'd be in there for close to an hour, just throwing rocks at me or pouring water on me, and then he'd start kicking me and hitting me with his long stick. Does this routine for days. Torture is a very traumatic event. I can imagine you still have some issues from it. Well, that was just a warm-up. One day he comes in, and I'm expecting more of the same. except he picks me up and drags me off somewhere else. This time it's a shack or something, kinda wedged in next to the hill. Looked like some place a witch would live. Takes me in there, and I'm expecting he's gonna kill me, rape me, or something like that. Instead, he shows me something that looks like a slaughterhouse or something. Just full of meat hanging on hooks. Dead animals, all kind of dead things. And it fucking stank, too. Felt like I was sticking my head down an outhouse. Props me up against a wall. He takes some kind of meat off the wall and starts hacking away at it with his big cleaver. Except it's made out of sticks and rocks or something. Like something a caveman would use. And he's flinging this stuff everywhere, getting little bits of blood and flesh all over the place, even on me. You say it was full of meat? Yeah. See where this is going? Anyhow, he's making me watch while he chops this stuff up. Then he pulls me over and cocks my head back. And he picks up this bit of meat he's been chopping. And he stuffs it right into my mouth. God, it was fucking gross. You ever eat raw meat? It's nasty. And I don't know what the hell kind of meat that was either. I try to spit it out because I don't know what he's trying to do. And that just pisses him off even worse. Pretty soon I'm getting the usual treatment. Beaten half to death for not eating what this guy is trying to make me eat. I get thrown back in the dugout. The next day he repeats the same thing. Every day he's got some new kind of meat he wants me to try. And at first I try spitting it out, but, well, I was there for days without food or water. By this time I'm getting real hungry. Maybe not hungry enough to actually eat that shit, but now I'm thinking about it. So every day I'm in there. He makes me eat some disgusting meat. Kicks the shit out of me if I put up a fight. But you ate it eventually. Yeah, I did. Anyone who's gone hungry a day in their life knows what that felt like. When you're that hungry, you don't really think straight. So one day, he gets me to actually chew and swallow some of it. So that was a slight improvement, according to him, because, well, he didn't beat the hell out of me afterwards. Then one day, he tosses me back into the dugout for the night. But this time, he leaves me there for days again, except now he doesn't turn up at all. I keep figuring, I'm going to take advantage of this, try to make my escape. But I'm tied up so tight there's no way I work out something in time, even after a couple of days. But you did escape, no? Sort of. I got out of it anyways, but after a couple of days, he shows up out of nowhere and drags me back up to his little slaughterhouse. And I'm starving at this point, so I don't put up a fight. Instead, when I get there, I see... Are you all right, Mr. Hess? Do you need a moment? No, I'm fine. He sets me down, and I see this young girl, maybe 14 years old, tied up just like I was, sitting right across from me. But she's awake, so she sees what's going on, and God, she was just petrified. Crying, moaning. But she couldn't talk because he had something stuck over her mouth, like some kind of transparent, like some kind of animal guts, but it was stretched out so you could see through it. And this man, this freaking butcher, he comes in and she just loses it. So I got no clue what he's planning, but I might have some idea. I think he's just going to do the same thing as before, making us eat more meat. But he doesn't. He just stares at both of us for a few minutes. Then he takes the girl and slams her head down on the carving board. This time, I do put up a fight because I know he's going to do something to this girl. He could kill me for all I gave a shit, but I didn't want something to happen to her. He leans over and kicks me in the stomach. Then he takes his giant cleaver and... God, he starts in on her. Chopping her head off. Oh, he's real sloppy, too. Didn't take her head off right away. He just hacks away at her neck, and she's screaming as much as she can, but the cleaver chops through her throat. Must have taken him 10 swipes to do it. That's horrible. I can't imagine how you felt seeing that.
No, you can't. But that wasn't the worst of it. He starts chopping all over, taking off bits of meat right where I can see it.
Do you understand? Now I can actually see where the meat's coming from.
This time it isn't that mystery meat he was giving me the last few days. He pulls off a big strip right from her back, skin and everything, and he forces it down my throat.
I can't spit it out. He holds my mouth shut.
I have to swallow a chunk of meat right off the girl he just killed.
The girl I saw killed.
He takes a piece of meat and eats it in front of me. We do this, back and forth, for hours. He lit up a fire at one point, started roasting the bits he cut off. He'd eat some, then he'd force me to eat some, for hours, until there wasn't anything left. Just a body with all the meaty bits stripped off. Not a skeleton, you see.